What do Falcons do? Rise up. Welcome to Rise Up Reactions, the show where we talk all things Falcons, NFL, Georgia sports, and in general, the sports news of the day. I'm your host, Dr. Lee Denning, lifelong sports fan. So today I just wanted to kind of continue my discussion on predictions for the season, going conference by conference, starting with the National Football League, moving to the American Football League. It's been a couple of weeks since I did my NFC South review, but there's been a little more information come out, and I wanted to talk about the NFC East today. The NFC South is probably going to be one of the weaker divisions and one of the overall more clear-cut divisions this year. The NFC East has traditionally been one of the weaker divisions for about the last 4 or 5 years now, but they do seem to be making some different strides in their division. I think it's going to get turned on its head a little bit this year as the Giants had a much better offseason overall than they have in previous years. I think their team is tremendously improved, and they're going to do better than they did last year. The Commies, however, are the opposite of that. I think you can almost pretty clearly say who's going to be at the bottom. And I think the Commanders/Commies are going to be at the bottom almost no matter what. But at the top, I think you have for sure a two-dog race. And if the Giants find a way to put it all together under a new coach and a new GM, they might just sneak in there and have a shot at number 2 or 1 in the division. I don't think that's going to happen, but let's just dive right into it. So right off the bat, we're going to talk about the Cowboys. So just looking at their schedule, they got a bunch of 50-50 games that I think are going to be a little bit tough for them, but I think they can win or go either way. Some of those include Tampa Bay, Cincinnati, the Rams, Philadelphia twice, Green Bay, Minnesota, Indianapolis. And when you factor in their entire schedule, I think their absolute ceiling is 13-4. I don't think they're going to hit that, and then their floor is going to be more like 9-8. I do think they win about half of those games at least, and then much of the rest of their schedule is not that hard. They get the Commanders twice, they get the Giants twice, and then they have a couple of other pretty easy games mixed in there throughout. But I do look for them to probably go somewhere in the 11-6, 10-7 range. I would feel more comfortable saying 10-7, as they do have a tougher schedule than the next best competitor in the league, in the Eagles. Now, some notable additions to the team. They got Tyler Smith in the draft first round. He's going to be a really good offensive lineman for them. However, he did lead the league in penalties last year for college football, and that was somewhere that the Cowboys really struggled. They led the league for holding and offensive line-based penalties last season. So I don't know that that's necessarily going to help. They're going to really have to get disciplined on the line this year if they're going to have any hope of competing. And again, we'll see what happens with them. Other notable additions, they did add Sam Williams as a defensive end. They also got Jalen Tolbert out of South Alabama as a wide receiver. And they did that as a direct replacement for a couple of their parts. They lost Cedric Wilson, their kind of third, fourth wide receiver, to Miami. Big loss for them, Amari Cooper. They got absolutely hosed in a trade to Cleveland for just a 5th-round pick. Amari Cooper is going to have a great year with Deshaun Watson if he plays, and that's a big loss for Dak in the offense, as he probably was the number 1 or number 2 receiver on the team. So they're hurting at receiver now, and then they also lost Randy Gregory, which was one of the hearts of their defensive line to the Denver Broncos because they just wouldn't pay him. So Jerry Jones has got to get his head out of the sand and start making some better deals with players. He paid Dak, and he's paid Zeke. Zeke is, I would argue, overpaid. Dak had his best year last year in terms of passer rating at 104.2. He had 37 touchdowns and 10 interceptions. He stayed healthy for pretty much the entire season. So I think they're going to be okay, just because Dak is one of the, I would argue, top 10 quarterbacks in the league right now, top 12 at worst. And that talent is going to win out, and they still have a better overall defense than most of the teams in their division. I would argue the Eagles have done a lot to improve that, though. Moving on to them, the Eagles have a very interesting schedule. Some of their 50-50 games include Minnesota, Arizona, the Dallas Cowboys twice, Indianapolis, Green Bay, Tennessee, and the New Orleans Saints. I actually think they're going to end up winning more of those than not. I think their ceiling is about 12-5. Just I don't know that Jalen Hurts leading them is a better situation than Dak. However, he now has a massive, massive weapon in A.J. Brown. That was probably the best move for the Eagles in the entire draft. In addition, they were able to get Jordan Davis at, I think it was 13 or 14 overall. He's going to be a tremendous player for them. He's a big, big boy out of Georgia. Fastest defensive tackle to ever run, to ever do the 40-yard dash at a 4.78. Faster than a couple of running backs even who attempted to do the 40-yard dash. And about 340 pounds overall, give or take, 6'7" frame. He is going to be plugging up the hole against Saquon Barkley, Antonio Gibson, and Zeke all year long. He's going to get to see all those teams at least twice. I think they're going to have a hard time rushing the ball against him now. In addition, other things that they added. So they added A.J. Brown, they added Nakobe Dean, Cam Jurgens. They really didn't lose a whole lot of players either. Nothing that's really super notable. So I think all they did is improve. I think their floor is about 8 and 9, just in case some of those games don't go their way. Again, I think they're going to be finishing somewhere on that 11-6, 10-7 range. When I ran out the entire schedule, I had them at 10-7, but I didn't really feel great about it. I felt like I probably am underestimating them, so they very well could win the division outright for the first time in a few years, again, competing with the Cowboys. Moving on, you do have the New Jersey Giants. They had an amazing first 2 picks of the draft, and I think they helped at both sides of the trenches with Evan Neal and Kayvon Thibodeau. So they really anchored both sides of the ball there on the front, the front 5 and the front 7 there. So I think they're going to be better overall this year. They finished 6-11 last year. Daniel Jones is still going to be lining up under center. And then you have some 50-50 games, including Tennessee, Dallas. I think they're going to steal one from Dallas. I don't think they will beat them twice, but I think they'll do that. They've got Chicago, Detroit, Philadelphia at least one time, maybe not. We'll see. Minnesota, Indianapolis, and then the Commies could beat them either of their games. I just don't look for that to happen. I think the Commies are going to be the clear worst team in the division, and it's not even going to be close. So their upside is 10-7. Their downside is about 7-10. I just don't think they finish worse than they did last year with that 6-11. So I think no matter what, they are a better team. And questions concerning them: is Saquon Barkley going to come back to rookie form? Did they do enough on the offensive line to create running lanes and protect Daniel Jones? Is Daniel Jones going to take a step forward now that it is a contract year, or are they going to be doing more of what the Falcons are doing and probably tanking for a better draft for next year? You don't really know with them. They do have a new staff altogether, a new GM. They've got a new coach, and I think it was way past time. They had an amazing draft. They did lose a couple of guys of note here. Jabril Peppers, safety to New England. Lorenzo Carter, their defensive end, to Atlanta. And then they also lost Evan Ingram. I'm not sure that was much of a loss, but they did lose their tight end to Jacksonville. And James Bradbury, which was, again, a really sloppy move by the GM. They just had some issues with the contract negotiations, and he opted to go play for the Eagles, a division rival, instead. So that was not really a great look here late in the offseason, but again, I think they're going to be better overall. They're still going to be better on defense. They're going to be better on offense for sure. So my prediction is that they're probably going to go 8-9 most likely. But that 10-7, if they were able to sneak another game in, get to 11-6 somehow, they could very well win the division. And we'll see. They're going to be one of the more interesting teams to watch the entire season narrative for this year. Especially, I don't think they're going to finish in the bottom 5 or bottom 6 again. And then our last team to talk about is the Washington Commies. I refuse to call them Commanders. I think that's one of the worst names they could have come up with. Red Tails would have made a whole lot more sense. You get to honor a underrepresented group of people in America. You get to represent a warrior group, some of the most feared combatants in World War II fighting Nazis. You would have been able to unveil that during Black History Month. There were a lot of things going for that name. They chose Commanders, which it doesn't even roll off the tongue well. So they're going to be the Commies going forward. They got some 50-50 games against Jacksonville, Houston, Atlanta, Detroit, Chicago, and the Giants twice. Just the fact that I named those teams who are all not particularly good, except maybe the Giants. We'll see what they do this year. they're going to be bad. Their ceiling is probably 6-11. Their floor, they could go 0-17. I don't look for them to be very good at all. They will have Carson Wentz under center. They made a trade, a fairly piss poor trade, gave up a third round pick and took on the entirety of Carson Wentz's contract with Indianapolis. So that was a terrible move. He is not very good at this point. I don't know what happened to him after his lower body injury against the Rams in his MVP-esque season, but he has not been the same player since. He fumbles the ball. He doesn't see the field very well. I just don't think that was a good move. I don't think it's even an upgrade over Taylor Heineke or, I don't even remember who else they had last year, but I just don't see that being an upgrade. Some notable additions for him, Jahan Dotson. They traded back with the New Orleans Saints. They could have had Chris Olave. They could have had Jamison Williams. They could have had guys that I think are better wide receivers. And they traded back for probably one of the guys who's fringe first round picks here. I just don't know what they were doing there. They had a bunch of needs that didn't include wide receiver. And then, again, they added Carson Wentz to the team. Their odds, just FYI, got worse per FanDuel and DraftKings Sportsbooks. I think they were about a plus 6,500 to win the Super Bowl. When they added him, it went to plus 7,000. So they arguably got worse adding him. They did get Fedarius Mathis, an Alabama tackle, in the second round. Then they turned around in the third round and went with Brian Robinson Jr. out of Alabama as well. The fact they took a running back in the third round, he is probably going to give Antonio Gibson a run for his money. I do look for that to be a competition in the preseason. And Brian Robinson Jr. probably has some fantasy value as well. Notable losses, Brandon Scherf, one of their offensive linemen. They will be hurting pretty badly without him. And then they've got Landon Collins and Matt Ioannidis. Both of them are gone at this point. Some questions surrounding the commies. Is Scary Terry McLaurin, is he going to play for him this year? He's been unhappy with his contract. They weren't really able to do a deal to trade him away. And again, he's probably not going to be great for fantasy purposes this year, but he's a phenomenal wide receiver who just happens to play for a really crappy team. Then you've also got questions around Chase Young, who, again, I've talked about this in other videos. FedEx Field is a god-awful dumpster fire of a field. I don't blame the Commanders for trying to make a new stadium. I think the new stadium they're talking about is in an absolutely horrible place based on what's been said by YouTubers who live in the area. But I don't blame them for trying to do it because, again, a November ACL injury to Chase Young at FedEx Field. Somehow they beat Tampa Bay that day, but November is a terrible month, and the Falcons are going to have to go there to play them. So I do think they're going to beat the Falcons purely because we're going to walk away with injuries from that game. So, yeah, I don't know what to make of them. They did also draft Sam Howell in the 5th round. I think Sam Howell could very well take over at some point in the season if Carson Wentz is looking terrible, which I think he's going to do. But anyways, the way I kind of see this finishing is overall, the way I ran this out, initially Dallas would have the tiebreaker over Philadelphia, though that could go either way. I'm leaning much more towards Philly winning outright at about 11-6, so let's just go with that. Philly wins 11-6. The Cowboys finish second at 10-7. The New York Giants finished third with a much improved 8-9, even though it's going to look bad on paper. They're going to show a lot of improvement and have a lot of close games. And then the Washington Commanders, again, ceiling's probably 6 games, floor's probably no games. I think they go 2-15. I don't look for them to have a good year at all. They're going to be competing for a top 3 pick overall next year, in which case they probably will draft another franchise quarterback to ruin or break his legs or do something as long as they're at that field. But anyways, that's just what I think. If you agree with me or if you have some different thoughts, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. If you liked the video, would love to see you hit the like button, consider subscribing. But until next time, rise up.